So here we are a few days out from round 2 of the 2023 F1 World Championship, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. My name is Martyn Lee from the Autosport podcast, joined by podcast regular and F1 editor Matt Q to discuss all the big stories to watch out for this weekend. Hey Matt, how you doing? Looking forward to jumping on a plane and seeing some more F1 racing this weekend.
Absolutely, I'm all packed and ready to go. I think I've got a post-it just saying put my toothbrush in my suitcase tomorrow morning, and then I'm on the flight out of Heathrow to Saudi Arabia. So bring it on.
Oh, here we go. Let's start with the fallout from Bahrain. Lots of hand-wringing from some of the teams. How have the likes of Ferrari and Mercedes been dealing with their disappointment? I'd quite like to start with Mercedes, if that's okay, because it seems to have got political, a bit spicy in places. This has been a very different start of the season from last year. The performance hasn't been what they want, but a lot more blame. Is that right? How are you reading the Mercedes situation?
Well, Martin, they've got this no blame culture, so they can't finger point anyone. But they have been getting handy with the quill and the ink, haven't they? They've written this letter to their fans to apologise, to say things will get better, and that's actually proved quite divisive, really, because they came 5th and 7th in the Bahrain Grand Prix, so obviously not where they expect to be, but not a disaster anyway. And some people thought this letter was a bit mawkish, a bit needless. That a lot of Formula One teams would sort of bite their hand off for that kind of result. But obviously they don't have a blame culture, so they can't. You won't see any high profile sackings immediately. But there has been rumours of James Allison being roped back in from his America's Cup work. I've been told that's rubbish and that the setup at Mercedes hasn't changed. But the cynic in me says perhaps they would say that. They're not trying to press on alarm bells, and that Mike Elliott, the technical director, despite the W13 and W14 not performing, they're not on his. He's not somebody that much closer to packing up his belongings as a result. But I do wonder, it is quite demoralising, I suppose, when you have Toto Wolff coming out after the first qualifying session, say we need a whole new car concept, what that says from morale and in terms of motivating to plough on with the current tools at your disposal in the W14, which, let's not forget, they might even be better off if the car sort of was porpoising, as perverse as that is to say, because they fixed that element, and they've matched so we're told, their performance targets for the season. But then when Red Bull find another 7/10, you can't really sort of factor that in, and then they've fallen short of that. And because the car hasn't got a fundamental problem like it did last year, they're not unlocking something or not expecting to unlock something that's going to give half a second. So that's interesting to see the obviously the dominant force of the last era sort of struggle, and now we're hearing that side pods will return, but it's not a new car because that's only the top services and we're ground effect era. So is 6s and 7s a bit dramatic to say? I don't know, but it's definitely out of sorts. Out of sorts.
It's got a sting though, isn't it? Because you look at Aston Martin, genuinely the, for now, second quickest team, at least. That might, we've had one event, let's not get carried away. But there was that story this week, in case our viewers and listeners didn't see that, where Aston Martin said, we thought the data was rogue. We thought that we'd got something wrong because the car was looking too good. But of course, what they said they did was they had Red Bull on the GPS. Red Bull was their target, and they were like, well, how can we be a bit quicker than that everywhere? And then they made a massive gain. So I presume for what Mercedes have done is said, we're a world championship winning team. We plot our own course. We know what we're doing. If you're Aston Martin, you can go, what are Red Bull doing? Let's copy it. Formula One in its history has a history of everyone copies the quickest team. So what do Mercedes do now? What are the team talking about? Are they going to do a Red Bull concept, or how do they recover this year?
Well, in past seasons, obviously they could have written a blank check and just thrown endless personnel and sort of resourced at it to catch up, who knows, by Baku or whatever. And obviously Aston Martin did something similar last year, didn't they? They turned up to pre-season testing with effectively the wrong car concept and started developing it needlessly, and then turned up with Bahrain with that first idea of the green Red Bull. But with the cost cap and limited wind tunnel hours, that's the massive dichotomy that Mercedes face. Do they write off this season already and plough everything into a B spec car for the latter half, or do they try and keep tinkering at this? But if I was to bring in some personal opinion, I'd say that for all teams now, they've got all the evidence they need. They've had all of 2022 eating Red Bull's dust, and then Red Bull have annihilated them in the Bahrain Grand Prix, and Aston Martin are now possibly the second best team by doing something similar to a Red Bull. If you're Ferrari, who we'll come on to, and saying we're going to stick with what we've got, or now doing what Mercedes are doing and scrapping your concept, that's all the evidence you need, that there is an optimum design as we understand it for ground effect rules, and as it stands, 8 teams haven't done that, and that's what they need to gear towards. And let's not forget, to add insult to Mercedes' injury, the Aston Martin uses their engine, their gearbox, their rear suspension, and is designed and shaped in the same Brackley wind tunnel. So if that doesn't, like a basic science experiment when you're in like year 7, where you change one thing at a time to work out the cause and effect, well, surely all of those things together point the finger at that it's the Mercedes aero concept which is letting it down, if Aston Martin with the same tools can perform so much better.
Yeah, it stings. It's got to sting for Mercedes. I'll tell you what else must sting. We recorded the Autosport podcast straight after the race last time out, and I didn't fully appreciate how quick Red Bull could have been. And it wasn't until the Monday that I went back and watched the first few laps of a lot of the drivers. And I think after maybe a lap and a half or something, Max Verstappen's engineer, I'll get this wrong, but said something like, "Okay, Max, gap is 1.2, go into maintenance." And DRS wasn't even turned on first 2 laps of the race, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I can turn everything down now. Off we go. I've got this one." That is a level of dominance. Again, one event. I'll keep caveating it. It's just ominous for some teams. What about Ferrari, though? What can you tell us about how they came out of Bahrain and what they might work on this weekend?
Well, yeah, Ferrari, they came away and said Bahrain was just a one-off. They're saying that, and to be fair, a lot of the drivers said the asphalt in Bahrain is, you might as well be driving over a cheese grater. It's incredibly abrasive and just destroys the Pirellis. And so that's why Ferrari particularly poor. Now, there are a few things to say about that. Firstly, Red Bull and Aston Martin were driving on the same tarmac, and they didn't suffer their rear degradation quite to the same extent, or nowhere near. So there is a way of getting around that, and that Ferrari and Mercedes, who did struggle, were obviously inferior on the day. That has led Ferrari saying it's just the asphalt, so give us time, we need to nail our setup and then we can do it. I would also bring that back to, well, they had 417 laps of testing at Bahrain, 3 practice sessions qualifying. That is a window in which to refine your setup for that one track, and they still weren't there. But the conclusion Ferrari have taken away from it is, if we can dial in our springs and dampers effectively, then we can stick with this car concept and change Red Bull. However, obviously Ferrari are a bit depleted on the technical side. So over the winter, Matteo Binotto was put in a position where he handed in his resignation, and he was both team principal and chief technical officer. Fred Vasseur come in as new team principal, but there's still no CTO. And now the head of car concept, David Sanchez, has left. Again, it's still a bit up in the air whether Fred Vasseur has come in, made his own mark, seen that this chap is a problem and said no, or there are reports going around that maybe Sanchez has an offer to go to McLaren. Now, the problem there is that we're already into the season, and you've got if it is a movement from Ferrari, quite a knee-jerk decision straight after the Bahrain Grand Prix. And so if you're making a high-profile sacking, if that's what it is, straight after the race, then that is obviously at odds with Vasseur saying, well, just change a couple of settings on the car and then we'll be fine. The other problem is that now means if no one else leaves, and there are rumours about people like Laurent Mekies in the team, but if no one else leaves, they are 2 down on the technical side. We're mid-season. Ferrari, whoever they hire from any rivals, if they're going to be moving upwards, those people are going to have to serve gardening leave. And that's what James Vowles has experienced at Mercedes when they're trying to bring in chief technical officer. So then they have to promote from within, which is fine. But then, you're not going to get the Dan Fallows effect, if you want to call it, where someone comes in with fresh ideas and boosts you up the grid. So that is concerning on the one hand. But to throw forward to Saudi Arabia this weekend, the Ferrari has so far looked mega at top speed, and in Jeddah there's a lot of that, and if you're moving away from the abrasive tarmac, perhaps they will feature a bit closer to the front.
Excellent. Well, we can't wait to see what Ferrari do. But let's talk about the two circuits, really. You've mentioned the differences. And let's talk about anything the teams can do. These first, I was going to say 4 races, because then we've got a break. But actually, it's the first 5 races until we finish Miami and go back to Europe with Italy. Is there anything the teams can do with these flyaway races? Can they develop parts and put them on the car? We have got that gap after the first 4 races. So is there anything they will have done even between Bahrain and Saudi this weekend?
Well, we'll find out on Friday when the FIA releases their technical document of upgrades, and let's not forget that Alpine have been saying that, you know, between the launch spec we'll be bringing upgrades for the first couple of races. So in principle, you can expect to see some different cars. But what you'll also get as well is that, you know, the RB19, for example, will have been conceived with a higher downforce and lower downforce specifications. So there will be tweaked narrower wings that you'll see cars sporting, so they're faster in a straight line. But, you know, when Mercedes says we're going to sport side pods, or McLaren says we're going to come with a B spec, you're not going to get it with a fortnight splitting the 2 races. But then you have to look at, you know, Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso in that final stint in Bahrain, he sort of made the race with those mega overtakes on Hamilton and Sainz. I would not expect him to feature quite so heavily this weekend. I hope I'm wrong, because that was a great source of excitement. But the Aston has a really clear development path. It's great at low speed. It's what Alonso can do under braking and how it handles with mechanical grip is ace. But what they're throwing their development at is it's still quite draggy. So that means there's potential to be unlocked from the car. However, if they don't do that straight away, which they haven't, then it's going to suffer at high speed, which is what, you know, Jeddah is predominantly. As I was looking at the data from last year with ground effect cars, and there's 3 sections where they're over 180 miles an hour. So that's where the Aston will lose out. But that's where Ferrari, if you think back to last year in Jeddah, the reason the battle between Verstappen and Leclerc was so good is because at the fiddly first sector, that Ferrari was super good at low end acceleration and really punchy Ferrari engine, and the car was lighter. And then Verstappen was able to come back at high speed, and it was Verstappen who won the race eventually with the DRS train. Well, the car traits, you know, imitation is the best form of flattery. They completely reversed for this year. So Red Bull, lighter, great at the corners, and Ferrari at top speed. So whether Leclerc can make that pay with a great lap in Q3 or Sainz as well, or it's a case of the Ferraris get into the DRS train of Red Bull, make it exciting there, then, you know, I want, and hopefully readers want, and my boss will be much happier if more people are clicking on our stories, because it's a much closer contest this weekend. So that's what I'm sort of holding on to.
But will it be a closer contest? How much did Red Bull have in hand? It looked so drama-free. Like, the most drama Max Verstappen had was when his clutch tried to eat itself driving up on that LED ramp at the end for the interviews, which I thought looked very cool, by the way. I like the LED ramp. It was a bit of a bumpy journey up there. That was his the most drama all weekend, you know, and I thought, my goodness me, he has got everything in hand. When you sit in the press conferences with him this weekend, or you're talking to Christian Horner, what are you expecting Red Bull to say about this weekend, the track, you know, their confidence? They seem on a high. What are we expecting?
Well, I think the only thing they can say is they expect it to be closer. One, because, you know, you're public, the way you express yourself in public, you can't, if anything goes wrong for Red Bull and they've said, oh, we're going to walk it, then you can't allow any sort of accusations of complacency. And I think the tyre degradation factor, it's not a sexy topic, but I think it is something to be considered, that Bahrain, the track surface, is a bit of an anomaly, so Ferrari can come back in. But, you know, what else can they say apart from keep coy? You know, I know George Russell was the other end of the spectrum, really breaking ranks, say, oh, I think Red Bull win every single race. Verstappen won't say anything like that. He can just say the car feels better. And to be honest, I know this is quite a cynical viewpoint, but do you remember in the Bahrain Grand Prix when he was going, oh, you know, my rear wheels are locking under downshifts and whatever? Well, maybe so, but maybe that's also like, oh, I'm having to, you know, you just say, I'm having to manage something to make it look a little less serene than it actually is. But yeah, Red Bull are seriously imperious. And like you said, whether they had to work for their victory in Bahrain or after those 3 or 4 laps, when you're pulling away, I think it was 7/10 a lap over Leclerc, and by lap 10, Verstappen was 6.5 seconds ahead. At that point, you do think, right, I'll start to manage these Pirellis a little bit more because I've got enough in hand. So I think we're right to say, as you're right to say, Martin, that probably wasn't 100% max for a lot of those stints.
Yeah. And what are your top stories that you're going into this weekend? I know you don't know what you're going to write yet because the news hasn't happened yet, but there's some other news stories that you are looking to cover, or people you want to hunt down as they're walking through the paddock to ask a quick question to, things that have been on your mind since the start of the season. What else are you going to look for this weekend?
No, I think we need to really nail down where Mercedes is at with its car concept, and Toto Wolff has said it will be abandoned. Well, how far along are they in terms of changing course? Did that coincide, that change of direction, immediately after qualifying when he said to the media that that's what they need to do? Has it been in the pipeline longer? Is there any truth to the rumours that the technical team is under intense scrutiny and there will be a reorganisation there? I think that's something of interest. Another topic I saw after the Bahrain Grand Prix was people going, well, the Aston isn't a Red Bull clone, isn't it? Because the front wing's different and they've got the gullies on the side pod, a bit like Ferrari. And so I suppose digging down into, Aston Martin aren't going to say it's a copy. And actually, I noticed Helmut Marko sort of retracted some of his words. So whether the Austrian lawyers had been in and said, actually, let's not accuse him quite so flat out, but sort of dialing down or digging into a bit, obviously ground effects. So, the current estimate is that 60% of what's going on underneath the car with the floor, what you can't see, and 40% the top surfaces. Well, is that true? Because the Aston, if you do sort of put this side by side, does look a bit different. So they're the main talking points. And also, as much as I hope nothing happens, obviously it is a year on since that potential, that very close driver boycott. I remember still being at the track at 4:00 in the morning thinking what was going on with the missile attack. And now there is a ceasefire between them, but as there was the MPs writing about F1 should not go to Bahrain, with the question of sports washing around Saudi, that has to be a topic that's never too far away. So to see where all of that goes, really. But I suppose I want it to be a dramatic weekend in the sense that we have a good race.
F1 and politics. I'm halfway through watching the Bernie Ecclestone Lucky series made by Manish Pandey, and so it's just a reminder about how political Formula One has been for decades. Actually, I highly recommend watching it. It's obviously told through a certain lens, but it's really, really, really good.
Can I add on that, Martin?
Yeah,
I haven't seen the Lucky documentary, but for people who say sport and politics don't mix, or Formula One and politics don't mix, all I'll say on that is that there's someone high up at Formula One who used to work for a former British Prime Minister, and he said dealing with number 10 wasn't half as political as Formula One is. So I think it's right up there.
I love it. You got drivers, you got teams, you got circuits, you got the fans. It's brilliant. We love the drama of Formula One. So as we head into practice this weekend, what should our viewers and listeners be looking for? Obviously, pre-practice 1, there'll be a certain run plan, but as we get towards FP2 and the quicker times, final thoughts from you. What should people be looking out for as the coverage begins?
Yeah, for diehard fans, it's all about FP2 for 2 reasons. One, it's most similar to the race in terms of time of day, ambient temperature. The track will be a bit rubbered in by then. And although it means getting out your pen and paper, if you're a bit like me and doing some lap charts, it's what they're doing on the long run stints, how they're, with their race tyres, race fuel, and who's coming out quicker. Handily though, it'll be my colleague Jake Boxall-Legg on the ground. He'll be going through all that data, so you don't have to. So check that out on autosport.com. And a new thing we're trying as well is giving the same sort of level of analysis to the pole laps and explaining who came out on top and why. And as you break down the data, you start to build a clearer picture of which car's performing better where. So they're good. And then obviously Autosport Live for all the session reports. What else can I plug? Driver ratings and the full report on Monday. And that's the Grand Prix weekend done, isn't it? We're already talking about Monday and podcasts with you as well.
Absolutely. Well, if you want to tune in just for Sunday afternoon, that's okay. If you want to tune in for the whole thing, that's okay. Formula One fans of all flavours are welcome. What you can't see off camera here is I've got 2 big screens and I have like 4 things on each. Now I'm super nerdy out over lap times, but hey, however you enjoy Formula One, that's cool. That's cool. Thank you very much for watching today. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below what you're looking forward to with this weekend's action. Do you think Red Bull had plenty in hand last time out and could easily stretch their legs if they wanted to? And who's got the work to do this weekend? Let us know in the comments below. We read all of them, and we'd love to know what's on your mind as well. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.